to the podcast Komodo. My name is Christina Petersen, and this is a series of conversations with Feldenkrais practitioners. And my guest today is Larry Goldfarb, and yes, he is really long a Feldenkrais practitioner and also today a Feldenkrais trainer. That means that he is working in trainings, or he is the educational trainer of the trainings, the educational director of the trainings. And so I'm very happy to have him as a guest, and I sent a very warm hello to Larry. Hello, Larry.
Hello, Christina. I've been looking forward to doing this with you. We've known each other for a long time.
Yes, we know.
Yeah.
I think it was 2006 or 8, around this.
Courses in Hamburg. Yeah, I think. Yeah. So we've seen each other a couple of times a year there for quite a while.
Yes, I know.
So I'm so excited that you're doing this. I've been following, and I am delighted, honored to be here.
Yes, and really, I'm happy.
I think it's great that you're helping spread the word and that you're giving people a voice about, the method in a very personal way. I think that's really, really cool.
Yes, and thank you. You said this about I give the people a voice. That was my idea, to have the possibility to know my colleagues more clear, and that they have a voice, that they can tell their story, because I think the story behind the Feldenkrais practitioner is something of the most interesting about the Feldenkrais method, and to understand what does it mean to be a Feldenkrais practitioner, and what is behind this this method. And so I'm so glad that I can ask you a lot about this. And do you know who was the first person who ever talked to you about the Feldenkrais method, or you read first, or what was your first contact?
The first time I heard about Moshe and the method was in a psychology class in college. And the head of the psychology department, this was at Amherst College, where I went the first couple of years as an undergraduate. And I can't remember the guy's name at the moment, but he talked about, it was a survey course, an introduction to psychology. And at the end of the course, we got to humanistic psychology, what was happening in the 70s. And this idea that psychology wasn't there to fix what's wrong, but to help people develop their potential. And one of the people that we were introduced to was Moshe, was Feldenkrais. And then I took another course with the same professor, and he had invited someone, I think he was a dancer from Denmark who was involved in Wilhelm Reich's work, and also knew Feldenkrais. And so that was the first time I did something that had a hint of Feldenkrais, to it. And then the following summer, so my second year of college, my sophomore year, I was going to be working at a peer counseling center where students counseled other students through crises. And there was a training program in Gestalt and transactional analysis, Gestalt therapy and transactional analysis at the New England Center for Humanistic and Transpersonal Growth, or some personal and transpersonal growth. And it was a summer-long course. It was for people working on their masters and Ph.Ds. And I was like, I was really a young, I wasn't anywhere near that. so I wrote and applied for the program. I didn't get in, and then I wrote back, and I got a letter from my therapist and my professor. Anyways, they let me in, and someone came to that program and taught an ATM lesson. And it was an evening class. It wasn't someone who I connected with particularly as a teacher, but the method. I remember getting up at the end of the lesson, we had done some movements crawling around. I got up and I felt so different. And we were in the woods in Western Massachusetts, that's where the center was. And I went out for a walk. And I was just marveling at the trees and the ferns. And then I realized I had left my glasses in the room. Now, I've worn glasses since I was 7 years old. And it wasn't that my vision was perfect, but it was transformed from that lesson. And I just thought, wow, what is this stuff? I had rolled around on the floor for a little while. And it wasn't, I mean, I was familiar with movement practices. I could say more about that if you want, but it was just like, it really, we have this phrase in English, it bowled me over, right? Like the pins in a bowling alley. I was like, whoa. And so that was my first experience.
Oh.
I was 19 years old.
Yeah, wow. Younger than I was with the first Feldenkrais lesson. But I'm interested. So you heard the first time in sitting there only, yes, someone was talking about what maybe you're thinking about human psychology and this all stuff. Hmm? Can you remember, it's really a long time ago, but can you remember what maybe was the little hook? What was like, yes, the...
So I've been interested in movement since I was really tiny. So when I was 7 and 8 years old, I took dance class from the woman who had taught my grandmother at the Mary Wigman School in Germany. So my grandmother, who was she had a dance school in Clermont-Ferrand, in like the Puy de Dôme, in the central part of France, right? I mean, in the heartland of France. I mean, far from the big. I mean, it's a city, but it's it's in a rural area. She had a modern dance school there until the day she died in her 70s. And Lillian Espenak, that was the woman I took class from, had been one of her teachers. She was a Norwegian modern dancer who moved to the States and became one of the founders of dance therapy. So anyways, I went and took classes from her. And I was not a very athletic kid, but I was connected to dance. And then I was, from the time I was 11, I was involved in the theater productions, both in the grade school and also playing children's roles at the university theater. And I became a magician, a professional magician. I mean, that was the beginning of it. And I studied pantomime. And so like the summer before that training I was telling you about, I spent in Rochester, New York at the Rochester Mime Institute studying pantomime. And at the beginning of the day, we would sit zazen for 20 minutes. Then we would do Laban movement for 20 minutes. And then we would do Gurdjieff esoteric dances for 20 minutes, right? So, I mean, I had done that. I was interested in psychotherapy. I'd been in therapy already, started therapy. And so I think what hooked me about Moshe was the connection between awareness, action, and attitude, emotion, and how those fit. And that only got, so as I continued in my, kind of personal exploration, I studied neo-Reichian approaches for a year in a training program. And then I moved to San Francisco, and I was studying all kinds of movement stuff, and I got involved in contact improvisation. So there were two moments that I remember really clearly. One was being in my Reichian training program and neo-Reichian training program, and kind of as a dancer, because I was in college, I was taking dance as well. At one point I kind of put my hand up and I said, what about anatomy and gravity? What about gravity? And the answer was, emotion, that's what matters. And then maybe 2 years later, I was in a contact improv training intensive. And at some point, one of my, still to this day, someone who is one of my best friends and who we worked together, anyways, at some point she started crying. And the teacher went up to her and kind of patted her on the shoulder and said, oh, honey, seems like you're upset. Why don't you go sit over there at the side of the room? And when that's over, you can come back. And I just thought, here's one context where emotion was set aside, and another context where it was the only thing. And I think one of the things that intrigued me about Moshe's work from the beginning was I guess we could say its holistic approach to a human being, like dealing with the whole person. Right? I mean, like, what's that, body and mature behavior, a study of anxiety, sex, gravitation, and learning. I mean, that's an audacious subtitle. And I think, that's what it's, there was something, even for the first time I heard about Moshe, that, I don't know, it caught me, Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think what I understand to make a consumption, to sum it a little
Synopsis.
bit, what I understood was that there was someone who brought it together, what should be together, like emotions and gravity and anatomy and everything is combined. And maybe before you had some idea about what is gravity, what emotions and anatomy, and you were like searching for this, maybe.
Yeah. Look, I was in college. I was pre-med, so I was studying biology, and I wanted to become a psychiatrist, so I was studying psychology as well. But it was like pre-med and biology was one aspect, and theater was the other, and I did both of those. And there was something about, I don't know. Yeah,
but I think you can't divide it. It's like so many
right.
many things are together. And I don't know if I can talk personal. What springs into my mind is, as a mother from 3 children, and I don't know what this happens, but if I think about how all 3 little babies were right after the birth, when they came out of me, and really how they act in the first moments, it's still today. Very curious, very like grabbing, sucking everything what is available. Yes. Or maybe more like cool, okay, later, or more something in the middle. And this stays the whole life. And this is also combined with the biology, how
Mhm.
strong the suck in the first moment. What it's not so much what I did with them, or what is about
Mhm.
the growing process. They came with this, and I had to deal with it as a mother.
Well,
And
yeah, yeah. I think there's in English we'd say character, right? Your
yes,
character,
yes,
and I think it's related for me. This is kind of an old-fashioned word in English with your comportment, which is how
yes,
you carry yourself, how you live in your skin, you know. And I've always been interested in that relationship, right? I mean, I don't think I would have said this as a teenager. I don't know, maybe I would have, but it's that connection, you know. And I just, I, I mean, it was much later in my training with Feldenkrais that I got familiar with the way that he talks about it, about feeling, acting, sensing, and thinking all being part of something. But but even before I heard him say that, I kind of felt that with his work, and so it's what's brought me to the method. You know, it was I mean, I did that ATM lesson, excuse me, and then I was involved in dance, and I studied Ericksonian hypnotherapy and NLP and other things. But I found out from one of my actually from my roommate at the time that Moshe was giving a lesson. And it was very funny because my roommate was in family therapy. She'd grown up here in Santa Cruz, in the town I live in again now. And she and her family was working with this therapist who was in the training in Amherst. And so I found out in this funny way about the training, and I didn't really know about awareness. I mean, I didn't really know about functional integration, about the hands-on work. I knew about awareness through movement. I had found Moshe's book called Awareness Through Movement, experimented with the lessons, not so successfully, perhaps now I realize. Um, but I don't know. I heard that Moshe was doing a training, and I was I was already going to Amherst College to I'm sorry, Hampshire College, where Moshe was doing the training. It was the first year, and I was at that time I was a community organizer, involved in politics in San Francisco, and I was going there for a course on economics for community organizers, Marxist economics for community organizers. Yeah, and I went a few days early because I wanted to meet Moshe and see if I could beg my way into the training. And I went. It was supposed to be the last day of the training, and I showed up at Hampshire College, and the gym was empty,
oi,
and everyone had gone already. He ended the training a day early, and I remember sitting in. I had to find a payphone. Right, this is 1980, summer of 1980. I had to find a payphone, call my friend's answering machine because she had driven 20 minutes to drop me off. I was driving home crying, literally crying, asking her to come back and get me. Right. So that was the beginning of my Feldenkrais career was a disastrous disappointment. I mean, I just like missed the boat entirely. And I thought, oh, but I ended up, contacting Jerry Carson and getting into training. But it, it was a harrowing experience, to get there. I mean, when I finally got to the training, it was just like, I made it. And then I found out, oh my God, there's this hands-on work. I mean, like, what's that all about? It was really, it was quite amazing.
very, oh, so wow. Very interesting. And uh, how much time was in between your first contact with the method, or your first ATM, and then stepping into the Amherst training?
2.5 years.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it was really good.
Yeah, and so I missed the first part of the Amherst training, right? So the Amherst training was the last training that Feldenkrais taught. It was the second training that he did in the United States. It ran from 1980 to 1983. I joined it at the very end of 1980, you could say, because there was a makeup between the first and second summer.
Mhm.
And the training was 9 weeks every summer, and the makeup was 7 weeks. And so we did the Amherst training met for 4.5 days a week, and we met for 5.5. And so we started with the first day, but after that, we never had the beginning and the end. I mean, so we're always, and we're in the desert in Southern California, like really far from much civilization. I think there was 36 of us from all over the world. Jerry Carson and Anat Banyal were the people who were the leaders. We watched, well, we listened to the audio tapes the first days, and then we watched the video, the whole training. We got FIs. It was quite an incredible experience. It was also interesting because, unlike the people in Amherst, well, actually, not often, but a few times, like Anat or Jerry would, more Anat would shut off the video and say something. So we got the feeling that we could stop Moshe, and that was good because the difference between watching him and then being in the room with him was so different, right? The sense. I mean, when you were in the room, it was like you were immersed in this experience that he was creating, and it was a huge room. There were 200 and some people. It was a gymnasium with a mezzanine and a very high ceiling, and he filled the space. It's like a one-man show. I mean, it was so captivating. But anyways, yeah, that was the beginning of the training, was those 7 weeks in the desert.
Wow. So that's, yeah, sometimes people do so many things to do a training, and that's really
Well, look, I did that training. I was at university. So it was basically, so the UC Santa Cruz here is on the quarter system, right? So instead of 16-week semesters, it's 10-week quarters. So I did my winter quarter of 1981 was the training. I actually got school credit. I got funding for it. I mean, I remember when I met Moshe, I brought him the letter. It was the President's Undergraduate Fellowship from the University of California, which is the highest honor you can get in the system. And I had gotten that, and I gotten support financially and academically for coming to the training. So it was actually part of my academic studies. And as part of that, I kept 2 logs. I had a log of all the ATMs, and I had my own personal log. And I had to do supplemental reading. And I also, at the same time, I did one other advanced psychology course. So I was doing a course, doing the training, keeping the notes, and I was also cooking for, I think, 9 or 10 of my fellow students, my cohort, because I think it was late in the first week that we were there. There were these apartments of I think maybe it was 5 or 6 people, men and women, and we were living next to each other. And so we invited the women next door over for dessert. And I had made dinner and dessert, and they were like, wow, this is really good. What did you have for dinner? That looked good. God, I wish I didn't have to cook. And I had realized that morning that I had just made a terrible math mistake, and I did not have enough money for food for all 7 weeks. Right. And I was a pretty poor student at the time. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was working as a cook at the university. I would get up at before the sun came up and take the bus and go and bake and make sandwiches and then open the cafe. So I had been, I love to cook. So I was working as a cook. And so I said, well, I'm glad to cook, lunch and dinner. And I did that. I did that 5 days a week for the remaining 6 weeks, lunch and dinner. I did the shopping, the menu planning, and the cooking. I didn't do the cleaning up. I did not repeat a dish unless they requested it. It was all vegetarian. And, but I did all that and I did the training. In a way, I think it made me sane because I think there's a certain way. Like I was glad to be away from home and be immersed in the training. But I think if that's all there is, it's kind of like it was good to have some ways in the moment of reflecting on my experience and capturing it in a journal. And it was good to have also this academic class to think about, how do these ideas relate to what was going on? It didn't take me out of the training, but it made for a kind of richer experience.
Wonderful. So this cooking idea, and I can imagine that it is also so centering. So I like to cook and to make food, and this is like, yeah, for me it's a pleasure to do and to also to serve this, and that you cooked also your experience together. I think.
Yeah, and look, I think you're right. I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, I've worked as a cook, but my whole life, cooking for me is, it's exactly what you said. It's centering.
Yes.
It really is, and the process of the transformation of the food, right? I love it.
Yeah, and cooking
So
is creative. You have to plan something, and you can't cook only by recite. Oh,
recipes, yes.
recipes. You have to plan, but to be in the smelling. So I think there is a connection in between. Yes, yeah, you need to be, and we can talk about cooking.
Yeah, but you said no, but you. So I want to talk about that a little more because you said something really great, Christina. You said you have to be. I think I'm quoting you. You have to be in the smelling.
Yes.
Okay, this isn't perfect English, but I know exactly what you mean because that's how I cook. And like my mom was a good cook and an amazing baker, and baking it's science. It's really precision. But one of the things that was so amazing about her is that she would pull things out of the oven, like she would walk into the kitchen, pull the cake out of the oven, and then the timer would go off. So she hadn't been watching the timer; she was smelling it.
Yes.
Yeah, she knew when it was done, and I always thought I mean, one of the books I haven't written yet is I want to write a book. Maybe we should do it together about sensory-based cooking.
Yes.
Like, what do you need to notice, right? Like the onions are done by how they look and how they smell, right? And
how you can steer them. It's
yeah,
also
yeah.
very
So there's
important.
the action, yeah. But look,
Yeah.
like especially right now, the smell is really important to me because I have I haven't had my sense of taste for most of a year, and that's following the chemo that I got at the beginning of the year, and it's gone from no taste to terrible taste, but that's another story. But I haven't lost my sense of smell, and it's such a great delight. And I was just thinking about it. I went for a bike ride yesterday, and then I was walking through my bike, and I were walking through the park behind my house, and there was no one around. I took my mask off, and I was just smelling autumn. Right? It is I mean, we always talk about how great spring smells with all the flowers, but I love the smells of autumn. Anyways, it is,
It's so interesting. So I think sometimes I'm well known for not being so concentrated, so pointed out, but I think that's something what is explaining the Feldenkrais method so extremely good, that we are talking about cooking, how it smells, what does it mean if you can't smell it. So we are the whole thing, we are again there. What does it mean for a person to lose something what is only biology? You have food, you are filled, but this makes something with yourself, and this is something what comes out of what is your state. I don't want to say that's your body side, that is your personal side, because this is an interaction. This
Well,
is
and
the whole being. And the Feldenkrais method is about it. Sometimes I, as a musician, I have a little bit the lack in the method of the hearing part. So, and also maybe the smelling part or this, but it is more focused on something, on movement and how this is connected with me. And that's good that it's not combined with smelling and hearing and everything. So that's maybe too much, but it's focused into this. But everything is the whole being. It's the whole self, which is everything of you.
Yeah, and it's about, so I mean, I noticed that, I've noticed in trainings when I'm a guest teacher and somebody introduces me, like some people will say, Larry's been a magician and a mime. He dances, he writes. And so I can look around the room and see, like who goes, oh, cool, another artist. And, who goes, oh God, another artist. And then some trainings people introduce me and say, oh, Larry's studied psychobiology and cybernetics. He has a degree in movement science, blah, blah, blah. And I can say the scientists get happy and all the art people go, but it's kind of like I have both sides, and where they meet is in the well, if I'm going to be academic, I would say the phenomenological, the lived experience of the moment. Right. But I realize in what I said to you, the way I think about cooking is also the way I think about lessons, right? Like, what do you have to notice in order to be able to do this? It really is on the sensory motor loop, the relationship between what you can do and what you have to pay attention to. Yeah. And I think I think those things they're connected. They're connected in my, my experience as being a magician led me directly to be a Feldenkrais teacher in so many ways. Part of that was that I was really fascinated by I guess you could say that if I get it, sensory psychology of magic, right? That magicians don't fool people. They create situations where people fool themselves because they understand how perception works. And as a Feldenkrais teacher, I don't teach people. I help people learn because I understand how they perceive. It's that same way of utilizing the way that we're built for our own good. That it's not just awareness of our own movements, but understanding how we're meant to move and how we can learn and putting that to use. And so I think there's, magic, cooking, contact improvisation, all these things that really I could see the roots of who I am as a Feldenkrais teacher in the things that I did before. Like contact dance is mostly it's a duet form when people move together, keeping a point of contact as they move, and they roll, fall, and fly together. But that idea of moving with someone and sensing myself move as they move, that informs how I am as a Feldenkrais teacher when I'm working hands-on with somebody, how I feel myself and the other person. So,
Yeah.
I think about it. I'm thinking about all these different experiences I have had previously and how they enrich and inform, my practice these days.
Mm.
I'm thinking about what my mom said to me once. She said that as a child, she even even in my early adult years, she said, I didn't quite know what you were doing, like why you went from this to that, and how your ideas developed and your interests grew. But looking back, thinking about who you were when you were born, like you said, and looking at all the things you've done since then, it just makes perfect sense.
That, that's so nice to have a mom like this, who is,
It is. It is.
yes, really nice.
Well,
Um,
and like, I mean, part of that for me and how that influenced my teaching is that I think my mom, I kind of have to say my moms, because I think I'm blessed with, I had a Feldenkrais mom. I have a Feldenkrais mom, a mentor, and I think I'm blessed with, these amazing women in my life who have supported me, challenged me, kept me honest. I think that their gift, not just with me, but I see this with the other people in their lives, is they could see. It's kind of like what you were saying about your kids. They could see each person for who they are and help them develop in that line to be true to yourself and be your better self. And I think that really informs how I am, with my students and with my friends. It's that like, well, here, let me tell you a story. It's kind of a weird divergence, but so we have a colleague, Dennis Leary, who was from the San Francisco training and is no longer with us. And I remember once teaching, I was an assistant trainer at the training that he was directing in Vienna. So this is the first training in Wien, maybe 1991 or two, I don't remember. And so by some strange coincidence, Dennis and I were born on the same day, which the trainees were aware of, I think. Um, but anyways, there was a rumor going around that the trainees were organizing a party for Dennis. And Dennis was one of those people who really disliked, and I'm being polite, I think he hated having his birthday celebrated. He just didn't like it. And so we found out that through the grapevine, we heard that there was going to be this party, and we talked about it in a faculty meeting, and I was nominated to go talk to the committee organizing this, the group. And, I went to them and I said, look, it's Dennis's birthday. And, like, I'm happy to celebrate my birthday because it's in the summer. I never got to celebrate it as a kid. I didn't have parties because everyone was away. So trainings were kind of fun. I got to celebrate my birthday, but Dennis isn't like that. So I think it'd be better if you don't have a party. And if whatever way you note or mark his birthday, you do, you can acknowledge it, but I wouldn't put a spotlight on it because he's not comfortable. And one of the people in the group, I mean, sincerely said, well, isn't the Feldenkrais method about change? And I said, yeah, but it's about changing the things you want to change, not the things that someone else decides you should change. Right. And I think that attitude, right, about each person being the author of their story and deciding, that, and recognizing each person for who they are. I mean, this, when I'm teaching a training, I don't want to produce a bunch of mini-me's, people who teach like me. I want each person to teach in their way. I remember the first time we met, or one of the, I think it was in the first advanced training that you were at, and you were talking about being a piano teacher, and I was just in that moment. I remember it because I saw the spark of who you are as a piano teacher, right? And what you brought to that, and how I could imagine how that would develop in a Feldenkraisian way. That you didn't have to be somebody different than who you were, but who you were was going to make, it. I could see what you brought to that moment and your potential. Like I remember when you told me you were going to be an assistant trainer and work in trainings, and I was like, I'm so glad, right? So I think that ability to recognize, who someone, their character, their nature, whatever their predilection, and to support them in developing that, I think that's a really important thread.
Yes, it's also very how to say, it's a very hard work if you want to have students. So I'm saying now about the piano, if you want that they are like good at note reading, and they can't, but they are good in another thing. So then I developed this at first, and then the next. So I can't change it. So at the moment, but I can go with them and to bring it to a point. And then when they are very good in this, then the other thing is so easy to learn. That's really something what I had in my mind before I found the Feldenkrais method, or I would say the Feldenkrais method found me. So a little bit, that it was like finding me. And I really like what you are telling us about yourself and what your experience, but something to bring it more into something chronological or in a row. There was like Amherst, and then plop, trainer. No, what was the way? What was the time in between? Was there a struggle? Was there a straight line? I'm doing this, and this is my path. And
I mean, I remember the first time I was at a training and somebody said that they wanted to become a trainer, and I was like, oh, is that a career path? And I mean, I was a trainer by then, but it was like I never set out to be a Feldenkrais trainer. Not at all. I like I said, I was living here in Santa Cruz when I was in the training in Amherst, and there was a small group of us, a handful, who were in the training from the area, and we started teaching classes and working here in town. And Santa Cruz is a bit of it's a progressive community, and there's lots of arts and different kinds of therapy and stuff going on here. So I think they were open to the work, and more so than in some other places in the world. And so I had a small practice. I decided that I wanted to work with people who weren't coming to see me, who didn't know about the method. So when I was around the same time of the stories I told you to begin with, I remember being in France with my family, visiting my grandmother and grandfather, who were members of the French Communist Party. And I remember telling my grandmother that I was I was involved in gay politics in San Francisco, and telling her all about what we were doing. And it was not just in San Francisco, it was statewide. That's a whole story. But and my grandmother looked at me, smiled, patted me on the knee, and said, "That's nice, dear, but how is that going to help the working class? And, that question, I mean, obviously, so I'm a red diaper grandbaby, you could say, but I was growing up with this view of culture and society. And so I asked myself, how do I make my services as a Feldenkrais teacher more available? And that got me interested in finding out if I could work at the physical therapy clinic in town, one of them. So I went there and, applied for a job, and I was ready to argue for it. And they were like, "Oh, we're interested." I was like, "Really?" It turned out, I didn't know this until years later, one of my first FI students, my individual hands-on students, was someone who ran the dance department. At that time, I think she was just a dance teacher in the department, but she was head of the dance department, one of the local colleges for years. And she had had surgery on her knee, and they had left it so that her knee couldn't straighten entirely after the surgery, so that she was going to have to work at that. That was the part of the plan. And, being a dancer, not being able to straighten your knee and not stand on that leg was really frustrating her. And she came to me and, said she'd been doing therapy, it hadn't been working. And I was like, knees. Do I know a lesson for knees? And I thought, well, this whole method started because Feldenkrais hurt his knee, so I should be able to help her. And I saw, how she was walking. And anyways, I did a lesson with her. I actually remember a lot of what I did, amazingly enough. And she stood up and she's like, "My heel is on the floor. My heel hasn't been on the floor since before this. This is amazing." What I didn't know is that when she left, she got in her little yellow VW Bug, drove over to the physical therapy clinic, walked in there and said, "Look, see, he did this in one session. You guys have been trying to get me to do this in months. Why couldn't you do this?" And then she walked out. And, much to the credit of these two guys who ran the clinic, who were brothers, they didn't take it as an insult. They were like, "We're interested in this." And one of them was really particularly interested in Feldenkrais. And so I worked while I was in college, and while I was doing my master's degree, I worked in the physical therapy clinic. And it started out seeing a few people a week. And at the end, I was working 3 days a week, giving anywhere from 10 to 14 sessions a day. They were 45 minutes long. But I did that all because I was going to graduate school. But it was, so that was, and that was amazing. I got to see all kinds of people who wouldn't otherwise come to Feldenkrais lessons. And so that was a really important part of my practice of supporting myself, of being in a collegial environment with other people, doing other things and working with them. That was great. And I worked in several clinics. So that was one thing. And then I moved from here up to San Francisco, which is about an hour, depending on who's driving, an hour and 15 minutes or 2 hours away, depending on the traffic. But it's 80 miles, 110, 20 kilometers, something like that. And I moved there, and there, all of a sudden, there was this huge Feldenkrais community. So there was a study group at one point that had people from the San Francisco training, from my training in Amherst, and from the more recent trainings, and we would get together once a month. I got to hang out with Dennis and some of the Elizabeth and some of the other people in the Bay Area who I'd gotten to know, and I got to visit the first training that they put together and give lessons there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in a training. I mean, I didn't go there to give lessons. I went there to, soak in the knowledge and to be in a place where I could have conversations with people about the method. And this is maybe 5 years or 6 years after I graduated. And I was giving workshops. At that time, I started giving workshops for physical therapists and occupational therapists around the US, and North America, a little bit in Europe, about Feldenkrais to those people, right? And that also was really interesting because then I was having to talk about our work to people who were interested in it, coming from a really different perspective. But all those, I'm thinking of other things, but all these things kind of came together in just being interested in learning more about the method. And I just thought, well, how can I learn more? And I figured the best way I could do that was to organize a training. And I wanted
to
to
work as an organizer.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, each view on this, because I think that is also a very interesting part, to organize the training, to be to communicate between the students, the trainer, and also to make something running, the financial side. That's very interesting. And this is really holistic, your background. I didn't know it before. Sometimes things I knew a little bit, but this is very interesting.
Yeah, so I wanted to do one at home, meaning in France.
Oh.
And I didn't want to do it in Paris because Miriam was there and I wanted to respect that. And so I ended up landing in Strasbourg. And part of that was because of Kathy Krieger, who is a Feldenkrais colleague there, who I met and I fell in love with. I mean, in a collegial way. I mean, we just had a good connection, and so I ended up doing one in Strasbourg, which is really funny because you ask somebody, you tell somebody in Paris you're doing a training in Strasbourg, and they're like, "Is that in Germany?" Well, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's on the border, and I organized a training. I was an assistant trainer, and I organized a training with Elizabeth Berenger as the director, and really with the help of I had been teaching these workshops for PTs, physios, therapists, and ergotherapists, occupational therapists in the States and in Europe. And Paul Newton had been teaching them in Germany for the same group and for psychologists. And he was an assistant trainer, and we had talked about doing the training together at one point. And anyways, I think maybe a quarter of the people in that training came from Paul and from the work that he had been doing. And it was really great. I mean, it was successful beyond my, we had 78 people in that training. It was a really big training. And 68, I think, or 69 in the second training in Strasbourg. And it was so cool because it was an international training. The training was in English, the big groups, like the ATM classes. And then we had small groups in German, French, and English. So I think we had one English group, one or two French groups, 3 German groups. That was the split in those days. And so it was a multilingual training. And the lunches were amazing because, it was all of these different languages. It was, and for me, I was immersed, I mean, Elizabeth was very open and involved me in the process of creating the curriculum. And it was just so amazing to, I don't know, understand the training from the backstage point of view, from the organizing point of view, as well as from, like I had been in a training as a student. I had been in a training as a faculty member, as an assistant trainer. And then I also got to see what it was like, what it took to produce that, to create the event for people, to support the faculty. Like we had faculty lunches 4 days a week. And the first training, I cooked those lunches because I thought I could do everything. So I mean, we would do an FI after lunch and then get together every day. And creating a situation where we could meet and work together as colleagues and we could be on the same page. It just seemed like the natural way to do it. I didn't know better. And, when I got to other trainings and saw that people didn't do that, it was interesting. But anyways, it was great to have that opportunity and to learn about it from that perspective as well.
Yeah. So this was after your first training. It was more really deep working since the beginning with the method from all perspectives. And maybe, I don't know if this is really possible, but we are talking a lot about the Feldenkrais method. So how fascinating and different words, but what is the real Nescafe? what is the, if you no water in the coffee, or only the pulver, only the
what's distilled from it.
Yes,
is what you might say.
yes.
Or extracted,
Okay.
the essence.
Maybe now we have the wine, but we want to move on to grappa or to the
Did you say that just for me? Because I love grappa. One of the few things I like to drink. I don't drink very much, but I do love my grappa. Actually, one of my favorite things is a cafe corretto, right? Which is an espresso with a tablespoon of grappa.
Oh.
Anyways.
It's very interesting, really, maybe it's not so common for women, but I like grappa because it's very strong. It's normally it's not so soft. I hate Baileys or the things with cream or like this, but like a grappa or something like this.
Yeah, but grappa for me, it's not hard. It's very round and full.
Yeah.
I know people have different reactions to. Anyway,
yes.
I think, look, what I think we share, all of us who are Feldenkrais teachers, and I think people who are using the method in their lives for themselves, is I think about it as Moshe's promise. You can help yourself. And the promise that I can help myself, and also, like for me, that I can be part of a community where we are supporting ourselves and being the best that we can be. That, maybe it's cliche to say empowerment, but that sense of agency, of ability, of our capacity to learn and develop, that, to me, that's the heart of the method. It's clear to me I like to say that the Feldenkrais method is an educational approach that has therapeutic side effects. Right? I think the important part is not that. The important part is that you can learn. Right? That the result of that learning is that you can do something you couldn't do, or that the way that you were moving that was painful, you don't engage in anymore. That is meaningful. It's incredibly meaningful to the person. But I think the heart of the method, the essence of it, is our capacity to keep learning.
Okay. It's very interesting. So it's in German. It's a talk in German with Brigitte Häuser, and she is the whole talk is about this, that she was starting to dance. She wanted to dance, but she knew by herself that she is not so flexible as her colleagues and these all. But she thought that's the reason she wants to be a dancer, because she wants to learn it. And
Exactly.
yes, and she thought there must be like a way to learn it. There is a potential but she can't have access to this at the moment. And this is also if you want to get rid of your back pain or maybe other things in your life, that you can learn something, you can find something, or yes, and this is beside a therapeutic reason to do the method. It's something completely different. It's not this. I like to talk to my colleagues, because every time in these talks I have a point where something drops into my mind which will be so clear, or that I have a new metaphor to explain what I'm thinking about the Feldenkrais methods. And it was, I want to come back to the theme of cooking. And it's the first time that I have the connection to something what I experienced when I was in school. So I had a school career where I had 2 years to cook 2 times in the week. Really, about 2 years I cooked. And the class was too big that we all can cook in one time. So, and we had 2 different teachers. I know I was very lucky. I was with my cooking teacher. She gave us everything, what we should do, and we have to do everything. And on the recipe, there's everything.
Recipe.
Thank you. Recipe. There is salt, like a spoon of salt, pepper, something. So, but she said to us, you have to cook like in the recipe. But at the end, you have to eat it. If you like more salt, you put it in. If you like less, you might like more sugar or this or this. You have to follow, but you know you have to eat it at the end. The other group had another teacher. They hated cooking because they really had to put in so much salt, so much herbs. And if someone said, I don't like coriander, but they had to put it into it, and they hated the cooking class. My group loved it. We had such a good time. We were happy, and I still like to cook. So, and I think this is also what you told about, to be maybe a Feldenkrais practitioner. We follow certain ideas, we create a situation, the people can go through it, but at the end, every time we say, okay, you can stop if you don't want to. And this is so important, to find your own style. So
absolutely,
this is very, very nice. And thank you that someone decided to bring me into this group and not in the other.
Well, and like, I think there's like, wait, you know me from being in class, that so many of my metaphors come from the kitchen, but like, I think, like, here's one of the things I learned in cooking, right? You talked about salt, is it is much easier to add than remove.
Yes.
Right. So like when I'm making a soup, and this has to do with just the way my mother cooked, I use very little salt. I mean, I cook flavorfully and I use salt, but I always figure someone can add more, but you can't take it out. And so this idea of like doing little increments and, like tasting your movement, if you will, as you go, I think that attitude, I bring the things I learned in other places, the skills, both in terms of doing and noticing, and the metaphors, I bring them to my practice as a teacher. And that creates me, my style, and what I have to offer. But I could, it's interesting in this conversation thinking about the roots of my own connection to the method. Yeah, and I think that's what makes for like teaching a Feldenkrais lesson is not an academic project. I remember being in a training program where somebody we were practicing teaching awareness through movement classes, and this person had to teach a class, and they were doing it on their own or part of it, and somebody with an academic background, working at the university doing research, and at the end of it, I was like, that was a very accurate lesson, but I wondered, did you do the lesson? I was like, oh no, I didn't have time, so I just, I read it. And it was so interesting because I could tell from the way he was reading it that he wasn't connected to the experience of the lesson. Right. And so I think there is, maybe it's hard to define, we have that great word, ineffable, it's like hard to put your fingers on, but there's this quality that, you as a teacher and me and everybody, a teacher, a parent, whatever, you bring yourself to the situation. Right. And I think it is the resonance with yourself, and the Feldenkrais method is a practice. It's something I do regularly, that I come back to. Like some people meditate, my practices are cooking, biking, and awareness through movement. These are the things that I come back to. And but it's my experience with those and with the challenges, my own personal challenges with my practice, and bringing the method to bear with the situations I've had to deal with physically, emotionally. That's what comes through in your teaching. That's what makes everybody, I think it's your ability to connect with that and to have done the work in those other domains that makes you, an engaging teacher. So it's fun to think about because, you don't plan these things. Well, I don't, there are people who, I can plan a training. I can plan a curriculum and deal with all the logistical stuff. But, as a career, I didn't plan this. I followed what I was interested in, what I loved, what drew me. And I trusted that. The path isn't always clear, like about what to do next or whatever, but and there's something, that's related to what you're saying about making something to your own taste, being true to yourself. Yeah. And I love that that's in the method, right? That's, if we'll stay with the cooking metaphor, it's baked into the method.
So I have the feeling that what you said is something, I don't want to add anything, and it's a very good end, maybe.
Sure.
But if there's something in you what maybe is want to come out too, there's the moment to.
Well, there is something I want to say, I think, because you've put me in a very reflective mode, and it's also there's a lot of feeling that comes with this, because I think of becoming a trainer. So some of that had to do with after my training, doing some advanced trainings with Gabi Yaron and wanting to spend more time with her. And then as an assistant trainer, working with her as the trainer in the trainings in Paris. And then, working with her in Dennis and Elizabeth's training, and then and then working with her in her training in Chicago, Evanston outside of Chicago. If it wasn't for the training, I would have had a chance to have that apprenticeship. And I think of Edna Rosades, who was in the San Francisco training, who had took me under her wing as in the second year of our training. So that would be the summer of 1981, and who was my mentor and my Feldenkrais mom all along. And I think about the importance of the other people. Like working with Elizabeth in the Strasbourg training, I wouldn't be a good trainer if it wasn't for all of these relationships, working with Dennis and being able to have conversations with him. And, we've had some great dinners, talking about stuff as colleagues and about our families. And, and I think about the method. This is about what I can learn, that I can learn for myself, but also that we can learn together. Right. I mean, in a class with my students, I think of a lesson as I think of my job as creating moments of co-discovery. I'm discovering and the other person is, and I'm inviting them into that. But we're making something together. So, we say in the Feldenkrais method that it's about being your own authority. And, as a mom, that the transition from dependence to independence is part of maturing, right? Body and mature behavior. But I don't think maturing ends at independence, right? I think you go beyond that to interdependence. It's not you or me, it's we. There's an us. And when there's an us, the calculus of relationship changes. Because then it's not like, is this good for me or is this good for you? But what's good for us together if we're building a future together? And though I'm helping someone learn for themselves, we're learning together. I'm learning from them. And so I think this has informed in all the things that I've done is thinking about relationships and community and building a we or having an us there. And, I wouldn't be, I guess you could say, I'm smart. I got good grades. I'm clever, but I don't think I'd be a good Feldenkrais teacher if it wasn't for Edna and being able to work with her and have her support. And so, my delight in being here with you is I think of you as, one of those people who's, my colleague and my friend. And we've had some intense discussions at times and some weird things have happened and we've found our way through them. Right. I mean, but that's made our relationship stronger. And I think our shared vision and values of wanting to help people and to build something, I think that's really important. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the individual part. And, I've been talking about myself. So I just think it's important to acknowledge those other people. I mean, like, I didn't talk about Heitz and Forster, who was such, like Moshe was such a big influence in my life. So I think about with our students and between ourselves, how we build a community of learners. Because when I'm in front of the room, I don't want to demonstrate teaching. I want to demonstrate learning. That's what being a role model is about. And so I'm learning too. Right. And so being in a community of learners where we learn together and we see each other, recognize each other, and support each other. And I think that's really important. So I think that would be my coda. That would be what I'd like to end with, is to say, it's about my personal journey, but it's also about the support and the relationships and how those continue to nurture and inform how I work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really very inspiring. And so we end here. And
thank you, Christina. That was really fun. I need to go eat some lunch. You probably need to eat dinner or whatever. It's late there, so thank you so much.
So actually, I have to sleep.
Okay, that's a good idea too.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.